All right, so example 3, it says, in a learning theory project, psychologists discovered that equation there is a model for describing the proportion of correct responses, F of t, after t learning trials. Find the proportion of correct responses prior to learning trials taking place. All right, so they gave us the equation there. And just to make sure we know what our variables represent, what was F of t? No? It says, blank, the equation there is a model for describing the proportion of correct responses, F of t. So it's the proportion of correct responses. Kind of abbreviate a little bit here. And so what is t? Yeah, it's after t learning trials. This is the number of trials. So it says to find the proportion of correct responses. So what are we going to solve for? F of t or t? If we're going to find the proportion of correct responses, I'm going to solve for F of t. Prior to learning trials taking place. Well, if it's before the learning trials have taken place, how many have taken place yet? 0. So this just tells us that t is equal to 0. So let's plug that in and let's solve. All right, so we're going to have to put this in our calculator. But before we do, I'm going to simplify this a little bit, okay? Well, yeah, let's simplify it a little bit. It'll make it easier. So we're going to do 8 over, and then in parentheses, we're going to do 1 plus e. What's negative 0.2 times 0? So raised to the 0. All right, so what did we get when we plugged that in? 0.4. All right, so prior to learning trials.
So why didn't we put the negative 0.2 in there?
Because I multiplied the negative 0.2 times the 0. That's how I got 0. All right, so prior to learning trials taking place. The proportion of correct responses was 0.4. All right, so same scenario here, but now it says find the proportion of correct responses after 10 learning trials. So what is that 10? That's going to be t now. So we're going to find F of 10. And what is negative 0.2 times 10? I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. Negative 2. All right, so let's put that in our calculator. All right, so we get 0.7. So it tells us that after 10 learning trials, the proportion of correct responses was 0.7. All right, so same scenario here, and it says, what is the limiting size of f of t? The proportion of correct responses as continued learning trials take place. So the limiting size, what is that maximum amount? 0.8. That's that C value, right? So the limiting size of f of t is 0.8.